Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Esteem a New Woman. The devilish diva starts on the road to becoming a new creature in Christ in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem a New Woman at Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. About 2 weeks ago, I did a live stream taking Neil Allen to the barbecue. And as I took him to the barbecue, what I wanted to do was try to explain to people how the publishing business works. Now, when it comes down to many publishers just don't want to deal with looking to make products for black readers because sadly, when it comes to the black reader, they just don't show up in enough numbers to be able to cover the production cost on any book that you produce, whether it be a trade publication or a comic book. Those costs basically are the thing that lead to many publishers looking to walk away from black customers, because when a publisher goes out here and invests their money, what happens with that publisher is that they don't see the return on the investment. And because the publisher doesn't see the return on the investment in terms of sales, they basically come to a conclusion that there's no customer base there. And as they see that there's no customer base there, that's where they say, hey, we just got to stop making this product and move on to a more profitable audience. Now, a lot of people want to go out here and believe you can go out here and do something different. However, companies have been trying to reach the black customer with literary products for almost 40 years. And I can remember back, like I said in the live stream, companies like Holloway House looking to reach the black customer. And sadly, they took big losses even during the black book craze of the 1990s. And we basically saw this go on during 2015 when Marvel came out with the all-new, all-different Marvel. And even though you had black characters like Riri Williams, Ironheart, and Sam Wilson, Captain America, Marvel took a 90% drop in their sales, showing everyone that the black customer wasn't coming out, even though black customers did come out to go see Black Panther in 2018 and made it the #1 movie in of the world. They did not come to the comic book shop to go pick up the books or pick up the books of black independent creators. And on top of that, you had companies like DC Comics that you had black nerds and black comic fans looking to go out here and boycott. And as they looked to go out here and boycott DC Comics, again, DC Comics for years had been publishing books like the Mr. Terrifics, the Cyborgs, and even a whole line dedicated to black customers in Milestone 2.0. But sadly, when it comes to the black customer, they didn't show up for any of those books. But we had people in the circles of black nerds and black comic fans looking to go out here and look to make demands for that DC, after 1,200 days, didn't produce a series featuring one of their black characters created by a white creator. But they just didn't understand how the business works. And when it comes to the business, a business is only going to supply what the customer goes out here and buys. And when it comes to the customer base as related to black readers, the customer base as related to black readers has shrunk since the days of the 1990s, when we were in what was considered to be a golden period. Now, during the days of the 1990s, we had Oprah Winfrey basically endorsing a lot of books and putting authors like Terry McMillan on. And as she was putting these authors on, it basically just revolutionized the black book market. And the black book market went on for a good, I say, 10 to 15 years. Unfortunately, what's happened over the last, I'd say, about 20 years is that the black book market basically has shrunk tremendously. And this is something that I have seen basically go on. And as I've seen this black book market shrink, you have people saying, oh, you can go out here and do something new to reach the customer. But if the customer just does not show up, there's a point where a publisher basically has to go out here and sit down and count the costs as related to their business. And when it comes down to a publisher, like a trade publisher like me at SJS Direct, now if I was going out here buying books, a book basically costs a publisher $5,000 for an advance, and then on top of that, that as related to the cost of buying the book, and then the printing cost for the book. So you've got about $10,000 in on that book, and you have a 6-month window to make that book basically sell enough copies in order to be able to recoup your cost on the book side. And on the comic book side, let's say I wanted to do a comic, that's maybe $10,000 in just the production cost, then another $20,000 in printing. So a comic book basically costs 3 or 4 times more than a paperback book. And again, you have to recoup your costs. But if there's no base of customers to go out here and buy those books, then you have a point where the publisher has to take a loss. And when it comes to publishers, again, they are very somewhat generous as related to things. In that 6-month window, they'll give you time to try to get your this base to come out. But if the base doesn't come out after a time, that's where the publishers go out here and in many cases will, in the case of the paperback publishing side, just discontinue the book, sell the remainders off to a place like Ollie's, and then on the comic book side, they will just cancel the series after possibly the 6th issue to let the story arc finish, and that's where they're going to take their loss and then eventually look to move on to another market. And that's basically where the black book market is currently at this point. When it comes to the black book market at this point, many publishers out here are basically just saying, okay, we've gone out here, we've made the investment, we've gone out here, we've spent the money, we've gone out here and looked to market to the black customer, we've gone out here and let people know that this book is coming out. But when we try to reach the black customer, what happens is the black customer does not come to the store to pick up the book. So the only conclusion we can come up with is that either the black customer is not interested in this material, one, or there's not enough black customers to create a base of customers to be able to continue looking to produce this material. That's the only conclusion a major publisher can make as related to the business of looking to try to reach the black customer. The only conclusion they can come up with is to say, hey, we spent the money. We spent the money on this material. We spent the money to produce this material. And now we see that from the sales that there is no base for this group, and since there's no base, we cannot go out here and expand our business. That's what the real world implication is, and this is where a lot of black people get it all twisted. They think that a business is supposed to just keep making something and basically just keep making it to appeal to a customer base that just isn't there. I mean, this was the argument that many Comicsgate YouTubers had back in the day, that you're making books for an audience that isn't there. And sadly, when it comes to the black customer sadly proves this point. And as they prove that point, this is where they don't really connect the dots and understand a business is only going to invest in what sells. They're only going to invest in what sells. And I keep making this point, and again, it feels like I'm talking to people until I get blue in the face, but they just don't understand it. Again, a publisher, when they go out here, they're making, on a trade side, you're making maybe 3,000, 5,000 units, and on the comic book side, you're making maybe 10, 15,000 units. These are the minimum print order runs, and if they can't sell through the minimum print order run, there's no reason to continue saying, hey, let's ink up for a second run, because that second run is going to cost that publisher money since they haven't made money on the first run. And that's where a lot of people think, oh, you can go out here and put out ads. Again, ads cost money, more money on top of this. And the more money you're spending, it's like taking good money after bad. And when you have a very limited budget like I do, you don't want to just keep spending money on things that basically are not reaching the customer. And again, if you're throwing money out there and the customer's not coming back, eventually you reach a point where you say, hey, there's no customer base here. There's not enough of a base to go out here and say that there's a market for this product. There's not enough of a market for this product. And when you have multiple companies that can go out here and make this claim, sadly, it becomes a fact, because as I said in the live stream, you had Holloway House. These were the people who made the Iceberg Slim and Donald Goines books. They were having this struggle. You then basically had Milestone Comics, which in the 1990s were having problems later on in the 90s as we had the comic book industry collapse. You had Marvel Comics, who basically, again, with the all different Marvel, if we want to go to recent situations, and then recently you have DC Comics. You have company after company that tries to reach the black customer, but if the black customer is not going to show up, there comes a point where people like a company like DC Comics, basically they look at the balance sheet and they say, okay, well, we made these books, we made Milestone 2.0, we made I Am Batman, we made Cyborg, we made Mr. Terrific. Nobody showed up for these books. Okay, we know that there is no black customer available to pick up these books, and if there are, it's a niche audience at that, and a very small niche audience, and it's such a small niche audience that it just doesn't cost out for us to go out here and look to continue making product, because why would a publisher go out here and spend money to make a book that's going to cost $10,000 and then print 5,000 units, or in the case of comics, you're getting 10,000 units? Why would I go out here and make that type of cost outlay when there's no return on the investment? Critical question I got to ask all these people. I mean, here you have a layout again. I'm putting out here, again, comics cost like 3-4 times the amount of money than a paperback book does. Because again, paperback book, you got $5,000 for the advance that you pay the writer. Then you have the whole production cost, which is possibly, again, this is about a $3,000 to $5,000 book run. And you basically are asking me to sit there and continue putting up these costs when the audience in and of itself basically is niche at the point where it's basically maybe 500 to 1,000 readers on a good day. I mean, 500 to 1,000 on a good day. And there comes a point where a major publisher just basically says, hey, this is just not worth the deal. We came here to sell, at least on the case of the publishing side, I'm looking to sell at least the 5,000 print run out, or be able to and have people ask for more. Or in the case of the comics, I'm looking for the comic to sell at least the 10,000 print run out. That's what the publisher is looking to do. They're looking to at least break even on these books. But if they don't see the book basically going out here and being able to sell its initial print run, there comes a point where the publisher basically says, okay, I've spent this money, but I'm not seeing no money come back to me, so there's no audience for the product. And that's what flies over the heads of some of y'all folks out here. Y'all don't really understand these costs that come with these products, and you also don't understand that when it comes to the publishing business, again, publishers run on a razor-thin profit margin where, again, you have a catalog of books and you're publishing lots of books because you know that one book may not sell and the other may sell. And if I go out here and I do a certain type of book and it doesn't sell, okay, then I have to say, okay, we got other books that are out here. And when it comes down to the black reader, this is why you have a publisher like myself doing books like YA fiction or women's fiction, because you're looking to try to reach that customer base to cover the cost of the fantasy book that basically has an even smaller niche audience. So when it comes to the publisher, a publisher has to have more than one title in a year, because there are you need those different audiences to cover the cost of those books. Because like I've said in many videos, 90% of books fail, and it's the 10% that pay for the 90. And that's why you have a publisher who will, like myself, who will do a nonfiction book like a Stop Simpin', or do a women's fiction book like a Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer, or a Spinsterella, or a black sorority book like the Thetas, because those books basically are lower risk and will basically hopefully sell more copies to cover the cost of something like an ISIS or an Esteem series or a John Haynes series book. Again, publishers basically, they have to go out here and count these costs all around, but you can't explain this to the black customer, who will sit there and just think, oh, companies just supposed to give you books. But there comes a point where we look at the audience and say, okay, there's a we're producing this book. We have a minimum order as related to a print run. We have a minimum as related to production costs, and there comes a point where we say, okay, we went out here, we printed 5,000, and we only got 300 showing up. There comes a point where the publisher has to say, okay, you know what, there's not enough people here to be able to consider keeping this book in print. The sales just aren't there. And when it comes to a comic, again, you got a 10,000 print run, and then you've got the publisher who's getting maybe at best 1,000 people. Again, that's not enough to cover our cost. And even in the case of print on demand, like I do, there still are costs. Now, I basically have costs mostly for the covers that I do. And again, those costs basically are like maybe $300 to $500 per title. And again, that's still a cost. And again, you need to have a certain number of customers come out regularly in order for you to keep that book in print. In order for you to keep that book in print, you need to have a certain level of sales. And that's where the black customer, I call them accountable, because they basically are the ones saying, oh, I want this book, but don't show up for the book. They don't show up for the books, but then sit there and say, oh, why doesn't anybody make children's books? Why doesn't anybody make YA books for black people? Well, if we don't see the customer base coming out in the numbers, we can't produce anymore. No, we can't produce anymore if the customer doesn't show up. And that's the core issue of the argument. Again, we're in places like Amazon, we're places like Drafted Digital, Google Play, and the books are available, but you have to come and buy the books in order for the publisher to continue producing the material. And everybody thinks that there's all these new fancy ways, but there's only, again, it's all about the customer coming to buy the material at the end of the day. And if you don't come to buy the material, the publisher can't go out here and pay for their expenses. I mean, internet is expensive, electricity is expensive, printing costs, paying for artists, all that is cost as related to the business. And there comes a point where the publisher basically says, okay, we tried to reach this customer did not show up. And if the customer does not show up, what we have to do is go out here and look at other customer bases. And that's where a lot of other authors will go out here and start creating white characters, or going out here and using pseudonyms to write stories featuring white characters, because there are black writers out here. They basically just go out here and say, okay, I'll just write this under a pseudonym and say I'm somebody else in order to maintain their integrity. They'll start going out here and writing white characters because the customer base is there. The customer base is in that place. And as they have to go where the customers are. And the problem with the black customer is they talk a good game, but they don't show up to buy anything. And in order to show a company that there's a base, like I've said in many videos, I mean, I've talked about this multiple times. You have to show that there's a base in order to get people to look to target you. You have to show that there's a base of at least about 2,000-3,000 people in order to get a corporation interested, because corporations basically like a Marvel or a DC Comics. They ain't here for no 1,000 people. Yeah, one of these indies will sit there and that number will be good for them. I mean, even for me, I've had books like A Recipe for Success and The Thetas. Those books sold 1,000 copies. But the whole thing is that it's not a lot of money at the end of the day. 1,000 copies is not really anything you can live off of. No, companies need to see bigger dollars. Again, this is how you get your books, again, out here and get a bigger following. And it's also how you get the book on a road to being adapted into movies and TV shows, because when it comes to movie studios, they got to see that there's at least 100,000 people who basically pick this up. They got to see that there's, again, I'll repeat it once more, a base of customers in order for them to say, hey, I want to buy those film rights or those TV rights. I got to see that there's a base of customers. And when it comes to the black customer, they don't understand how the business works. They don't understand that you can't come to somebody and say, hey, invest in this, and there's no customers to come pick this up. I mean, nobody's going to go out here and make that $10,000 outlay for a paperback book and that just to get 300 sales. Nobody's going to go out here and try to go out here and put up $40,000 to go just to barely sell, again, 5,000 copies on a 10,000 print run. Nope, that's just not cost effective. And you try to explain this to black people, but black people don't understand this. They can't connect the dots as related to the business of publishing. And that's what I tried to get across in that live stream. But sadly, nobody gets the point of how this business works. Nope, nobody gets the point that, yeah, I may be trying to talk to the comic customer to try to get them to pick up some other books because, again, prose books, comic books, it's all about trying to get you to buy a product. And the sad part is you buy nothing. And even though we try to market to you, whether it be companies like Marvel or DC or Holloway House, you get the same result, which is a customer who doesn't show up. And again, if you have a customer that doesn't show up, what eventually happens is that business basically either goes out of business or that business basically starts shifting to other customer bases. And that's where you get the same black folks who didn't buy anything talking about like these guys with the hashtag DC so white, companies so racist, when the company went out of its way to spend money on you. And as they spent money on you, you didn't show up. So what is a company supposed to do? You've gone out here, you've marketed to this customer, you've gone out here, you've talked to this customer time and time again until you, like me, you get blue in the face. And eventually there comes a point where you look at your money, and eventually, like I said, these corporations, they look at their balance sheets very quickly because they're looking to get their results very quickly. And if they don't see the paper trail as related to, okay, this book basically earned out its advance, it earned and sold all the print books, or it sold all the comics, then they, as related to the minimums, and we're talking about the minimums, again, the minimum is basically a certain number. And again, if you can't move the minimum, basically what they're saying is, okay, there's no customer base here. We're going to move to another customer base. And as we move to that other customer base, we're not going to feel bad about looking to not reach the black customer because we went to reach the black customer, but the black customer just didn't show up. So if the customer doesn't show up, we don't have to make that product. That's where DC Comics was. Okay, you want to say DC so white? Well, we looking at our numbers. We looking at our sales numbers. And as we look at our sales numbers, we don't really see you coming to the store. So we don't want to hear nothing about, oh, you want this book because we're looking at the customer base and we're seeing that there's no customers here. So this is the problem that, again, many black folks have as related to the disconnect. They don't really understand how this business or any business works. They just think, oh, company's just supposed to give me something, when it doesn't work that way at all. No, there's, again, rules to this business, and people take risks based on the rules and the cost of the business, and eventually a company reaches a point where they walk away from the black customer and eventually say, hey, let's go over to these other customers and see if they'll go out here and buy other products that we have to offer. Now, I've been publishing books for 18 years on the SJS Direct Imprint, trying to make positive stories that feature black characters, and you can pick up those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format, and you can also find those books at Draft2Digital and Google Play. And you can also pick up my first full comic, John, and possibly my last comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, on Lulu.com in paperback, and you can also find it on places like Amazon's Kindle and Google Play. And my second comic, A Steam Blast from the Past, is also available on Amazon.com. No, it's not. It's No Good Deed that's available on Kindle for just 99 cents, and it's also available in the Esteem series book, A Steam Blast from the Past. And if you want to see me go out here and make more videos talking about the publishing industry, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Runway of Doom. The goddess next door struts her stuff on the catwalk to take on a runway of rogues in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS Runway of Doom at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this spooktacular Spinsterella story. Pick up your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.